Our next guest, who is hanging out ready for action, Craig Giannino. I think I first met Craig, I hope I get this right. About 12, 15, 12, I'm gonna go with the 12 to 15 year span just to cover myself. And I'm blanking, was it Mateo Junior College?
College of San Mateo.
What was that?
College of San Mateo, you got it.
College of San Mateo, beautiful field, I'll never forget that. Wasn't feeling so well that day, but we managed to pull it off. And we bonded right away. We share a love for culture and mental game. And one thing about Craig, from the moment I met him, boy, you talk about, it seems like the best coaches I know are always the most open-minded. It's just unbelievable how consistent that is. And even though Craig ran an incredibly successful program at San Mateo, he was so interested in the mental game and meditation. And he's a huge fan of Augie Garrido. He used to go to the University of Texas and just hang out and learn from Augie. And Craig has gone on to really embrace the mental game, mental skills, culture, leadership stuff to the point where he's the founder now, which is pretty cool. There's not many founders of an event at the ABCA show. That's a pretty good thing. We have another one on here with Perry Husband with the hitting hot stove. So actually we're rolling today. But Craig started, he'll let you know, a few years ago, the culture and leadership hot stove. And last year, I think they had about 800 people in the room. And he's at USF, University of San Francisco, where he's involved with player development. But Craig just does so much more than that. So I can go on and on. It's just such an honor to have you here, Craig. And selfishly, I cannot wait to dive into some of these concepts of mental game, leadership, life skills, whatever we want to call them. So without any further ado, CG, it's all you.
Oh man, Jay Unit, what an intro. It's a pleasure to be here. What an honor. Steve made me feel like I'm not very smart in that first hour. So I think I got to get back to kinesiology and biomechanics and physiology and refresh, because he challenged the cognitive side of my mind right there. That was awesome. But it's great to be with all of you. Yeah, I hope that we just have a conversation. I don't have all the answers by any stretch, but I am passionate about player development, specifically connected to the human emotion and human development and character development and makeup. Been very, very lucky and fortunate to start a long time ago as an assistant at the College of San Mateo, and then become the head coach at Jaeger in Northern California. And that's where I really started to embrace the mental side of the game and this idea of really trying to just develop confidence in players. And I think at the end of the day, we watch and observe behaviors. We know when our players are feeling pretty good about themselves, and we know when our players are struggling, and how quickly can we get them back on it when they're struggling. And I think that's been the biggest goal. And there's so much to this. It's not like seeing ball flight, and it's not like seeing spin rate. There's a human element to it, and I think it all boils down to the relationships and the connectivity that we invest into our players to really, really get to know them. And I think something was said in the first hour about messing our players up, and I'm certainly guilty of screwing players up because of my own ego and getting in the way of what I think that players should be able to do, know, and learn, because I'm the coach, right? I was super wrong with that. And I think when we build fences around our players, we get ourselves into some trouble. And I had to learn that. I'm still learning that. But boy, can we learn from them when we give them the opportunity to have a voice. We communicate with them in a way that is horizontal as opposed to vertical. And we ask them what they need from us and how do they best learn? How can they bring the best version of themselves to the yard every day, regardless of circumstance, when they're going good, when they're going bad? How can we help them stay in that sweet spot of being who they believe they want to become, and help nurture that, grow that, develop it, build it, reinforce it, encourage it, and just remember that it's not about me. It's not even about them. It's about all of us, right? It's about all of us learning and growing together. And when you can get into that space of this like horizontal working space, playing space together as a group, it's a pretty special and magical dynamic. And nothing I'm going to tell you is anything you haven't heard before, but I will say that I look at confidence. When I think of confidence, I just think it's trust in action. It's like you see it. You can see when that player is trusting themselves, and it's pretty special. But I'm really interested in like the behaviors and observing behaviors in players. So I think I'm going to stop right there, because I don't want to just talk at you. I want to have a really collaborative conversation, and let's chop it up. And I don't know, I will say this. So I work with USF, and really specifically, we do meetings intentionally for the team. It's really about them, and it's player driven. I just facilitate, and I try to give them an opportunity to have a voice and really build what they want, what they believe to be their DNA and their identity as the spring season comes. And so we take an hour, usually a week of intentional time and space to be able to just really create a connectivity, really dive into some deep stuff in terms of their needs, their wants, and really celebrate, like getting them to understand, like we need to celebrate everybody's imperfections. Like, I think this game is so messy that we try to be perfect at this game, but really you need to be perfect in your process. If you're perfect in your process, then you have a chance to really overcome the messiness of the game when it shows up, and it does show up. So I also work, I consult with other teams in terms of team building, mental skills, culture development, and I'm really passionate about that and helping teams with that, and individual and former players as well. And Alan has been on a few of my calls with teams in the past. So with that being said, I'm going to stop right there, and let's just, does anybody have any questions? Let's have a good conversation here.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is we're gonna try something new this hour. I'm getting savvy on Zoom. Raise your hand if you know how to do that.
Ooh.
And then I'll come around and click. Before we go there, I picked up on one thing you said that I want to bring up, and then I want to do a quick follow-up. And believe me, the goal of today is to get to you guys. So trust me, not in domination mode here, but I want to pick up on a very important thing you said, because I think it's going to be of interest to everybody, whether you're an athlete, coach, or person. And the word is this. You talked about, and by the way, you said the word process, thank you. You said the word trust. And so I'm going to save my answer after for yours. But I think a great question everybody would want to know is, how do you develop trust? Because I will give you a quick hint. I have a tweet that we put out, which is, trust is the source of confidence. So without leading the witness, what I'd like you to do is, in your own words, is answer, where does trust come from? And then I'll give you my 2 cents, and then we will get to the group.
Awesome.
CG, go ahead.
No, do we have any questions, or anybody want to chime in?
Yeah, no, I wanted you to answer where you feel trust comes from.
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Whew. I think trust comes from a deep convicted belief in yourself.
And then where does that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And where does that deep conviction in yourself come from?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's rooted in the energy that's been built around you, that's been poured into you over time, because we know that we know what those energy givers look like, and we know what those energy takers look like, those vampires look like. And I think that you can't do this by yourself. You need the support of others to fill the tank and encourage. And so I don't think it's just a soul individualized piece. I think it's a combination of who you surround yourself with and what you're a part of.
Okay, so let's say, I like this, let's keep going.
Keep going.
So let's say you get some trust partially, you can say 50-50. I would say it's eventually maybe more like 90-10, but whatever the numbers are, let's call it 50-50. So we got to 50% from the group around us, right? Our support system. Of the 50% that we'll call you, where do you get trust from?
Being comfortable with who I am.
And how do you become comfortable with who you are?
I think that comes down to just not comparing yourself to others, which, let's face that happens all over the place with our players. Give me a head nod, those that I can see you. Does that happen? Players comparing themselves to others instead of staying in their own lane and just working the process to get better day by day. And I think that for me, it's focused on all of what Alan would say is focused on the constants instead of the variables. And I think that's where my trust comes from, is really priding myself as a coach, making sure that I'm prepared, making sure that I'm taking care of every little component of controllable that I can. And then I will let the chips fall where they may when it comes game time.
So what I love about that is now you got back to the controllable. So really you're back to you, whether or not there's people around you supporting you. Yes, we want positive support versus negative, although we could say negative support can also create positive changes. But where I'm going to keep pushing you, but I'm going to give you a quick statement, and then we're going to get to the questions, because this is your show, not mine. So trust is a source of confidence. If we were to keep going, you got to the end point, which is your own constants, your own process. Like, what do you need to do to be great? And the angle I'm trying to push in here is back to meditation or mental practice, because to me, one of the greatest benefits of meditating or any kind of mental practice with yourself, so to speak, I mean, groups are great too, is you're getting intimate with yourself, right? And because you're getting intimate with yourself, you're getting to know yourself well, right? You're getting to hear what your mind is saying, right? Negative messages, positive messages, but either way, you're getting to learn about your mind, right? And so to me, there's an intimacy that's built through any kind of mental practice. And my 2 cents for the mental skills portion of today is that if we're going to truly want to get the best out of ourselves or the best out of our players, we have to provide time for them where they can get quiet, they can get in their own space, they can tune into their breathing, they can tune into their deeper inspiration, their deeper intuition. We just talked with Steve about this idea of personal preferences. So you got to get in tune with what makes you tick, which Craig was just talking about. So sorry for going sideways a little bit, CG, because you just brought up the word trust, and that just was like a bullseye. I really think it's one of those topics I don't even think is really talked about in the mental game very much at all. We all talk about, be confident and trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I think it's a powerful topic to say, well, where does trust come from? And how do we get to trust? And my experience from not only my own life, but dealing with players for 33 years that I've done this, it's just it's 100% that when, I don't want to say 100%, sounds like an infomercial, but when people stop and truly get in tune with themselves and get to know themselves well and get intimate with themselves so they can trust themselves and know what their process is, by the way, I feel like that is the ultimate way to optimize trust in yourself, which then to me leads to confidence. So sorry for going through that, because I feel like this was your deal and I just got on a roll, but we're going to switch this back now. And so we're going to open the floor for questions because Steve, some of his specialties, some of Craig's specialties is not not just quote unquote like mental skills. Craig is into stuff that I really don't know, have not studied much of it all, the leadership, the culture stuff. So make sure this is not just about mental skills. This is also about leadership and
Let,
culture.
let me just jump in real quick on something that's actionable and tangible for your athletes, and it's an assessment. And I got the opportunity the last 2 summers to coach in the Cape with the Whitey Red Sox, and I super excited to go have this opportunity. Best amateur players in the world. That you're like, how am I going to help them, right? So I kept my mouth closed for a good portion of the time and just watched, observed, and what I realized was they're just big bodies, but they're little kids inside, and they go through the same emotions. And I was just talking to Coach Weinstein earlier before this call today, and he was talking about at the big league level how it's no different. They're just big bodies. They're little kids. And something that I've found effective with the players, especially when they're struggling, is this idea of CAR. It's confidence, aggressiveness, and relaxation. So if you ask your players, when you see them going bad, and we get stuck on the physical side of the game. He's not doing this, he's not doing that, he's not doing this. Sometimes we just got to stop and take the physical part out of it. At the end of the day, the dude's not confident. Like, bottom line, he doesn't believe in, and he's not trusting himself right now. So stop impressing upon the physical side and the physical component, because at the end of the day, we want him to compete. Just like they said earlier, right? Hunter Pence, pretty eclectic sort of physical makeup when you see Hunter Pence swing a bat. But that dude competed, right? Nobody's going to mess with him. He's a pretty intense competitor. So you can do it in a number of different ways, but to simplify it, just go on a scale of 1 to 5. Ask a player, hey, what was your confidence today at the plate? It was a 2. What was your aggressiveness at the plate? It was a 2. What was your relaxation at the plate? It was a 2. So we have to work on those components, and then the physical side will follow. And I've had a lot of success just by using that little assessment and reflection piece for players. So I'll ask players to do that in BP. I'll ask players to do that in competition and game at bats, and I'll ask them to report back to me. Well, why were you not aggressive enough? Maybe it was a 2. I wasn't aggressive enough, so I wasn't competing on my terms. There's a such thing as being over aggressive. Why were you over aggressive? I wasn't connected with my breath. My heart rate was elevated. It sped up on me, and I became over anxious. And we see that happen all the time with our players. But I've found this tool to really, it's simple, and players can connect to it, and it's ongoing. It's a formative assessment that they can really attach themselves to and own as their process. And if we just guide them and have conversations with them, it's not really me teaching, and I guess I'm teaching, but I'm really just supporting their process and guiding their development, connected to this concept of CAR.
Do you create that into a routine that is team culturally, that everybody's thinking that way? And
yeah, so what we've done in the past, and we've done it in a number of different ways. It's a really good question. We ask players to define what confidence looks like for them. How do they, when they're confident, what does that mean to them? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? We do that for all 3 components, because when we get that information as teachers and coaches, we can really observe it. And so then it adds to the culture. And then not only does it help the coaches with the players, but we also share the information and allow the players to have conversations with one another about what it looks like. And so they start to learn a little bit about each other. And then all of a sudden, they're starting to notice things that are characteristic or uncharacteristic, and they're able to have conversation. Hey, bro, let's go, man. Get back on it. I don't see you taking your breath. I don't see you going through your focus routine. So everybody's has this opportunity to learn about each other, and that just increases and enhances the connectivity of the group, and it creates a lot of self-awareness with the group. And so we've put it out there, but essentially they're responsible to take ownership and really, really help one another. And obviously as coaches, we're there to also, give feedback constantly. But really good question. I don't know that I answered your question though. Did I, Bill? Cool. Go ahead, is it Tamara?
It's Tamara. Yes. Thanks, Craig. So when I'm hearing this, the first thing I'm thinking is how powerful it would be to capture it, right? Whether it's in the phone or even in some sort of a journal. And I was curious if you recommend that, if your players are open to that, because it's such a powerful growth tool. Okay.
Check it out. Joe Maroney, always buying journals. I'm constantly writing. I'm like a C student. I just write down like whatever comes to my head. And I put it down. It's like diarrhea of the pen, right? So I write it down and I ask the players. We do journal. So the meetings I have with teams, when they come in for the first 3 minutes, it's a reflective piece. And usually we'll do it in 2 forms. It'll be individualized and it'll be team focused. And they'll answer both questions. So what have you done well? Right? What could you do better? And what could you do more of? And so we do that, like individually assess that, collectively as a team assess that, and then it just reveals information, right? And so with that information, then we have the players get up, move around the room and interact with one another and communicate face to face, making eye contact and actually learning how to listen to understand versus listen to respond. And we say to them like, hey, listen, can you maintain eye contact? Can you control your focus long enough to listen with intent and try to really understand and learn what your teammate is trying to convey, and then flip it. And then we'll have them, and then we'll come together as a group, and then we'll share out, and then we give the players the opportunity to come in front of the group and share with their partner what their discussion points were. And it's a really powerful process because you're really valuing their voice and empowering them. And at the end of the day, like, I was coached by a lot of really, really, really good coaches that I learned from, but I was also coached by a really, 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 really frustrating man back in the day. And I vowed that, and I'm thankful for it because he taught me a lot of what I didn't want to be as a teacher and coach. And it was a very, very, very vertical sort of leadership style. There's time to be top down, right? But when we, like I said earlier, when we operate in that like horizontal space, boy, can we learn from our players. I mean, a lot more than probably I'll ever teach them. So did I answer that question, Tamara?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Pete.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with our kids on the mental side because all performance with teenagers, in my view, comes down to that, if they're going to get anywhere long term.
Mm-hmm.
And this is partly an answer to Tamara's question and partly my little bit of tribute to what Alan had to say about trust. One of the first things that we do with our kids is find out where their anchors are. We really want to understand whether is it a physical feel that they need to have. And I work one-on-one with kids and in groups. We're looking for what can they feel that they can count on, that they just feel like they can go to. Sometimes it's there, but they have no idea what it is. They haven't identified it. With girls particularly, but with some guys, it's about relationship. Do you trust your relationship with your teammates? What is it inside of you or inside of what you feel or outside of you that you feel you can trust? And I've found it can be almost anything. Mm. But if they know what it is, then we don't always have to work on the doing part. We can work on the being part. And if we can get to that and help them create for themselves in moments of crisis, what happens when they're calm? Fake it till you make it has some sense for me. But by and large, if you don't have to fake it, it's a heck of a lot easier. So go to that place that you can find that leads to whatever performance you're trying to get to. Eventually, they'll connect that. As teenagers, they don't connect anything day to day, much less minute to minute, much less week to week. And so what we're trying to do is help them find anchors, their own, not mine, but their own, that don't necessarily relate to my experience, but that can get them to a place where performance is possible, and to get them to a place where contemplation is possible in those moments where they have time to do that. And that, for me, has led to, I can't find anything else to blame it on. I've done this for 30 years.
Mm.
It leads to a state of mind that just helps them, and they get it from themselves. And if they can do that, I don't have to be everything to everybody, because, well, I've known Perry for a long time, and he knows that I'm not. And so he knew me when I was really an idiot. And what we do is ask a lot of questions to try to help them find whatever it is they're searching for that they need. But it's never, almost never, about something inside the game. It's how a foot feels when they get in a batter's box. It's not about technical. It's how they feel around their teammates. And I think the reason that the program I was in college and the program that we've built have been successful, if you want to call them that, in terms of W's and L's, is that kids felt great about each other. And so we really tried to build on that stuff. This is a long answer to a short question, but I'll let it go with that.
Pete, that's a great point. Many points, actually, many bullets just fired right there. And I'll add to that. I think that it's really important for us to be intentional about catching them doing the right thing and actually giving them specific feedback as to why we're highlighting them and praising them for, it might be the most minute, to us, to maybe the average eye, it's the minute success, but that needs to be celebrated, and that needs to be uplifted, and that needs to be highlighted, because that's how you start to build confidence. And we also need, flip side of that is when you're having conversations and you need to have a difficult conversation with an athlete, is your players just need to know the truth, and we can do that honestly and transparently in a very compassionate way. So it's the need versus want, right? Like, this is what you need to hear right now, and it might be what you want to hear, but it may not be. And it's just part of learning that you're in a place where you're going to continue to develop, and we're trying to help you get there. And I was talking to Jerry Weinstein earlier, and man, he talked to him and like the head like explodes. But he was I was asking him a question about, and maybe Pete, you can speak to this. I mean, Alan, obviously I know can speak to this, but we see, at least I've observed in the last 5 to 7 to 10 years, I've seen more performance anxiety than I ever have seen as a player growing up and as a younger coach. And so how do we combat that? How do we overcome that? Because it's pretty prevalent right now, and there's so much noise out there, so much distraction. And how do we keep them focused and confident? And that's a whole nother like rabbit hole to go down. But I see it with our own players. I see it with the players at the teams I work with. I saw it in the Cape, but it's crippling, and it's not going away. And it probably goes back to Alan, right? Like, they need to understand the value of meditating. They need to understand the value of the breath. They really need to understand that is a skill that needs to be developed, and we need to be intentional about it. But we're too focused on our swing mechanics.
I deal with kids that college coaches eventually want and recruit. I deal with kids with tools. I deal with no one these days who doesn't have performance anxiety. No one. And I can also say, I think authoritatively, that much of that comes from home. That
So it's-
performance is the standard, not effort, not attitude, not the things that are the intangibles. And college coaches and professional guys, for the guys who get drafted and go, have to deal with that part.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, that's a big part of why our game is such a mess. We have forgotten about the inside of the kid and
Mhm.
are dealing only with the outside.
You know,
I mean, just
yeah,
the-
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just wanted to add a couple things, and I want to make sure we get to Perry and Matthew, who have their hands up. Maybe to put a quick capper on this. I'm always going to come back to meditation or mental practice, because everything we're talking about, we keep talking about the person getting to the person feeling good about themselves. And Pete, I totally agree with you. The fact that what's going on in the homes plays a huge role. But my take from my experience is that we didn't have cell phones in 1995. We didn't have the internet in 1995. We didn't have video games the way we have them now. These kids nowadays, we obviously didn't go through COVID. These kids have so much stimulation going on, so much, period. Their brains have so much stimulation. So again, I feel like it's 1990 and I first started out talking about meditation and mental game. Although now it's come light years ahead, we're not close yet to where we need to be. For instance, I wrote an article 10, 15 years ago in collegiate baseball called Mental Practice Plans. And the whole point of the article is that if you're going to spend 3 hours with your players each day, how are you not putting at least, if the game is 99.9% mental eventually between the lines, how do we not have at least 15 or 20 of those minutes dedicated to meditation, breathing, relaxation, whatever you want to call it, quieting the mind, learning what your thoughts are doing, why are your thoughts there, how do you deal with your thoughts? So I'm going to put a bow on this, and then Craig, if you have a follow-up, great, and then we'll get to Perry and Matthew. My 2 cents is this: until we provide time for the players, and until they hopefully learn or want to do it on their own, unless they've learned it somewhere else, which is great, add our practice plan. I don't care if it's a 30-minute hitting lesson. It doesn't matter. If you're a coach and you want to get the most out of your players and you want to help them the most in life, if there is not a segment dedicated to getting quiet, getting into the breathing, slowing down, I used the word earlier about trust, the word was intimate. If they don't know how to get intimate with themselves, whatever that means, if they don't know what it's like to feel connected to themselves, to understand themselves better, then I think that we're kidding ourselves. And it's wonderful to keep pushing out this great information on the mental game and stay in the moment and be process oriented. Trust me, I talk about those all the time. They're very, very valuable and they can do the job. But I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't get athletes to stop and understand what it means to stop and breathe and be quiet and tune into themselves and not the video games and not the phone and not the consequence and the results of their next at bat. And so when I hear these conversations, to me, this is as black and white. When I've done a bunch of pitching hot stoves at the ABCA, and Sarge has been there for a bunch of them. I talk for a few minutes on the process and the mental game. We go straight into a meditation. And then we talk about the meditation afterward. That to me is the key. That is the foundation, and that's where it starts. So for anybody on this call, whether you believe this or not, that is the most, in fact, I don't need to say anything else the rest of Craig's 24 minutes, because that to me, if I could say one thing in the mental skills portion today, that's it. It's online mental practice plan. There's a 10-minute guided meditation on there. It helps your players, it helps you take your players through a breathing exercise. But again, this is about CG. And Pete, thank you for your awesome input. CG, do a quick follow-up if you want to that, and then let's make sure we get to Perry and Matthew.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want a quick shout out to Sarge. Great to see you, and Pete Savage, you legend on the call. You better add something to this, because that guy's for real. I was gonna say that we just need to talk about this stuff, like, and it's okay to talk about it. Like, I think this idea of, like, you know, we coach predominantly male athletes, right? And we're all men, and we're not supposed to talk about our feelings, because that's like, you know, in a lot of at least the way I was born and raised, you don't talk about your feelings, right? Until I learned that I need to talk about my feelings. Because it, like, actually helps and matters. And it's like, is it a sign of weakness or is it a sign of strength? And, like, I'm sure you all know the author Brene Brown. It's like, there's some powerful literature right there that is game changing. And it's like, you know, the last 15 years, I have spent time in a room during physical practice time. I've cut an hour off of physical practice time to go into a room in a space to be able to allow our student athletes to have a space where they can be still, be quiet. And, you know, you get 35 guys in a room for 3 minutes in silence. It's pretty awkward and uncomfortable, but the game's pretty tough, right? The game's pretty uncomfortable. So if they can't sit in 3 minutes and learn to develop the skill of, like, sitting in a space for 3 minutes in discomfort, and then over time they learn and it becomes more comfortable to them. And I'll be the first one to admit it was uncomfortable for me. But I realized that I needed that probably more than they needed it. And so we just chipped away at it. But this idea of vulnerability, I certainly don't have it all figured out by any stretch. And I'm scared of a lot of things, and I'm insecure. I have all these fears and doubts, but but my heart is for real, I think. And I care about what's inside the heart and soul of players and athletes, and try to move that thing. And if we can move it just like an inch, day by day, like, you know, maybe they're going to be a little bit more successful in other areas of the actual performance. I'm done.
Awesome. Perry, you want to fire away, and then Matthew, we'll get to you. And I see Pete too there. What's up, Pete and Steve Smell? God, there's so many great resourceful people on this call. I wish we had time. Greg's here, I see too. And anyway, Perry, Paradog, as I like to call him. Paradog and I, sorry, one more shameless plug, not even a plug, just a comment. Perry and I go back to 1990, about 2. So we're on 30 plus years, and many people don't know this, but Perry Husband is the originator of where the J bands came from. They were called Weisselators. I used to buy them from Perry, and he made them for us at Jaeger Sports almost 30 years ago. So there's a quick note. Paradog, the floor is yours, and then we'll get to Matthew, who's patiently waiting. Thanks, Matthew.
You know, guys, I've done a ton of work over the last 10 years with University of Oklahoma softball, and over the last 5 or 6 years with the offense specifically, baseball doesn't know this yet, but they just changed the game forever, because what they accomplished there was something that I think adds to this trust a lot. And it's also, I think, an answer to the idea of what's going on with athletes right now. And one of those factors is the known. Like, the ultimate confidence is when you know something's going to happen. You're so confident in the way that things are going to happen. Their game planning is so much better than everybody else's. They had more home runs than strikeouts. They tripled most programs' home run production, and they led the nation in batting average at the same time. Like, UCLA was the number 2 team, and they hit more than double their homers, and they out-hit them by 100 points. And they did that based around this concept quite a bit. And one of them is the understanding of knowing your opponent from a strategic standpoint. So analytics has gone crazy recently. That's one of the reasons why I think there's a lot of issues out there with not knowing, because you can breathe perfectly, you can have yourself ready to go, but if your strategy is off, in the sense that you're not positive about what strategy you should have, it's very difficult after that to throw a perfectly executed pitch, have it get rocked, and have no idea why it just happened, or get beat by a pitch because you were reacting to it rather than acting on it. And those guys they've set the bar extremely high, but I think it's because that other element of trust, which is I trust that what I'm doing is the right thing precisely. And that's partly analytics, but it's realistically taking that next step, and they're playing a different game than everybody else from when it comes to that understanding of it. So I would just say that there's another element to trust, and that's the part where I've spent my time.
Love it, Pear Dog. Thank you, brother. Matthew, do you want to unmute and fire away a nugget? Pear Dog.
Yes, sir. How are you guys?
How are you,
What's
Matthew?
up, man?
Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you guys. I'm honored to be on this call with so many great men and women that I followed, through Twitter and different other formats. So I'm honored to be here and honored to be able to pitch a question to Craig. So, Craig, I just had two quick questions on the culture piece. That's a subject that I've intentionally been studying and reading about over the last 3 months. And I was just curious, this is, again, kind of a two-piece question. As a new coach, what would be the first necessity in establishing a new culture? And the side question would be, as a new coach, should trust or respect be the first thing that you're looking to gain from your new players? And thank you for answering.
Yeah, no, great question. The first piece of it is I would actually throw the question back to you. Like, what environment, what does your environment look like? How will you cultivate an environment where your student athletes can bring the best version of themselves to the yard every day, or to school every day? Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Sort of reverse engineer it, right? Backwards design it. And then whatever that is, whatever matters to you and what you value that to be, you teach the ever living shit out of it. And you feed it, you use your players as examples, you find different and creative ways to spread the message that's consistent based on your standards and what that environment looks like for you, right? And that's a big mistake I made early on in my coaching career, was I had no idea what I wanted my players to leave with. And Alan will know this because this goes way back when I first met him. I was sitting in church one day, and I knew that I valued work ethic in my players. I wanted them to be workers. I wanted them to work in the classroom. I wanted them to work on the field. I was afraid that we were never going to work hard enough. So like fear, like really, really fueled me in terms of like emphasizing that in the program. And then the second part was bringing a contagious attitude, like an attitude that like everybody wants to be around. You know what it feels like when you walk into a room and, like you walk into a room and do you gravitate towards that dude, or do you actually want to leave? Like I wanted players to come in there and be a part of it and be excited to be there and bring this attitude of like just contagious energy that uplifted and encouraged. And then lastly would be, it's not about anybody but your teammates. So it's about committing to somebody other than yourself. So it was a commitment to the team. So it was work ethic, attitude, commitment to team. You're talking to a C student here. I was sitting in church, I was writing this out, and I was like, holy shit, that spells we act. Work ethic, attitude, commitment to team. I'm like, that can mean a lot of different things. It could we could probably spark some curiosity out of people as our little hashtag. And so we ran with it. And I said, no matter what, from that day on, I vowed I didn't care if I cared if we won and lost baseball games. But what I cared mostly about was when 10 years from now, some kid was wearing a t-shirt in a supermarket and, hey, you played there? What can you tell me about that experience at that high school? What was it all about? I sure hope they would speak to, you get where I'm going with this. So anyway, so I think that answers that piece of it. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
No, that's great stuff. You answered that first one perfectly. The second one was just, as that new coach, as you step in, which one would you work harder to establish? Would it be the trust piece amongst your players, or to get your players to respect you? Which one would be the first?
I think
priority?
they're sort of married together, and I think that it's I don't even think it's like I'm trying to get their respect. I think it's a two-way street, right? It's a reciprocation. So it's like, hey fellas, I'm gonna work really hard to earn your trust and earn your respect. And I hope that you'll see it the same way that I'm gonna approach it. And from that point on, then I'm gonna really go to work in investing in getting to know my players. And really, I'm not talking about getting to know my players and how well they're gonna perform on a baseball field, but I'm like, I want to know like who mom and dad are. I want to know how many siblings. I want to know how many languages you speak. I want to know like what your upbringing was like. And I know that's time, effort, and energy, but it takes time, effort, and energy to build a program and to build something sustainable. And I think the person that really should answer that question is Savage, because Coach Savage has done it for shit. I don't know how many years, but it's sustainable. So I think the investment in your players in terms of getting to know them and really, really, really pride yourself on the relationships, that sort of is the key that unlocks everything else.
Okay. I can see that. So great. Brother Craig, I appreciate you taking time to answer my question. Definitely appreciate it. So
always, Matthew. Thank you, bud.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
And by the way, we're going to sneak Pete in here in a second. Pete's a dear friend of ours. And as Craig said, if we can get a word from Pete, that'd be awesome. I want to tell a quick 30-second story. How about 20? I was doing a podcast with, you guys probably know Coach Sheets, Jeremy Sheetinger, with Scott Brown. Scott said something, it's funny, these things you hear that the hair on the back of your neck stands up. These are just nuggets you just remember the rest of your life. This is probably 5 years ago, one line. And what Brownie basically said is, he walked up, it was about this kind of topic. He walked up to one of his players, and he said, hey, how you doing? And the player said, yeah, I'm doing okay. And then Scott, just full engagement, no pressure, just said, no. How you doing? Like, I want to know, how are you doing? And that got me, because, you talk about being present. You talk about really connecting. Ken Ravissa obviously has that great line about, if you want kids to care about what you have to say, you have to first show them you care about them. It's a legendary line from Ken, that we all miss dearly. And so I just want to echo, I think, what's been said, but I think it's a really simple way to really get in there, Matthew, with your players is, and I'm not saying you don't do this, but you really address your kids, especially one-on-one, and you say, hey, how's it going? There's a depth. There is a depth behind that, and it's real and it's authentic, and they feel it viscerally. And so I just wanted to add to that. And then Pete, what do you got for us, man? We want to say hello to you, and feel free to share anything that's moved you or you feel like sharing.
Yeah, I think it's great. This has been a great session, and I appreciate being involved. Learn so much from you guys every time I get on here. But I think, I think one of the foundations of trust is consistency. Just being consistent. That word consistency means so much, whether it's like you said, in the meditation or in the mental game or in your practice habits, you're as a coach, you got to be consistent. Your players have to know what to expect. And if you can be consistent, the second one is care about them. I think that's probably most important. Once they figure out that you truly care, just like you talked about Ken's favorite, famous line, they'll do anything for you. And now care is not always giving them a hug. Sometimes it's kicking them in the butt too. It's not. Sometimes I think the mental game and caring and all trusting and all this stuff is always, hold the parachute and sing Kumbaya. It's not always that way. It's just about being consistent and building toughness in players. And, the other thing is character. I think coaches have to do what you're asking your players to do. There's so many times when, and because players can see right through guys that do not have high character. So I think high character is important. My teams have worked both with Alan and Craig. And it's funny, it's been a few years since we worked with Alan. I think it was 2019. And they're still talking about that. They still talk about that 30-minute session that we did in that hotel room, or that hotel conference room. And so it changed lives. They're not talking about the 5 games we played in that tournament. They're talking about that mental game experience, which was a meditation session that Alan took us through. I was with 2 of my players yesterday. They both graduated in 2020, which was the COVID years. And one of them plays for Craig, and his name comes up. And the first thing he says, Coach, the best thing about Craig, there is no doubt that nobody on the planet cares more about us than him. And so when that's the first thing they say, it's like, that just shows you how much work he's put into it. And the other guy happened to be in Alan's room in 2020. So this, I think, is the key, getting to know our players and building them from the inside out. Thanks, guys.
You're the man, Pete.
Pete, thank you, brother, man.
Yeah.
God, I wish we had more time.
Can I add one more thing? Or no, are we too late?
No, we got 6 minutes, my man.
6 minutes. I just forgot what I was gonna say. Shit.
See, Pete, see what you did to him, man? You got them all.
No. Oh no, I got it. I think this is for coaches and for players as well. If you can teach them to buy into this idea of becoming more self-aware of others' needs, like, it's amazing how that takes this pressure off of their personal game, and it comes full circle and gives back to them. And it's a tough concept to understand maybe, but I think that that's something that can be taught. And I think it has to be taught more than ever now, because it's so me. It's all about me. No, there's a time to be selfish, but there's a whole lot of time to be selfless. And we have to understand when it's the difference between those two, and when the appropriate time is for each one of those individually. I don't know if that's making any sense. Secondly, the other part of this is, I don't care if it's a 5th grader or a senior in college, or take the guys in the Cape that I got to coach. If anything else, lead your players to, shouldn't lead them, teach them to manage themselves and lead themselves first, because until they can do that, they got no shot of really achieving their ultimate goal and maximizing their potential, right? As we know, right? Talent is potential, right? How do we bring that potential out of them? And I've noticed when I work with a lot of players and teams, the place it breaks down the most frequent is them not becoming responsible in leading themselves and their responsibilities outside of baseball. When we talk about student athlete, all of the responsibilities that come with becoming a student athlete and managing those responsibilities. So behaviors off the field. So if your behaviors are inconsistent off the field, typically, from my experience, I have no data research to prove this, but typically there's a disconnect and there's an inconsistency in performance on the field. Just based on my experience, I got no data or research to prove that. But bottom line is empower them and lead them to manage themselves and their own responsibilities so that they can become coaches of themselves. And then that eliminates us, as Jerry Weinstein says. They'll still need us a little bit here and there to keep them in the guardrails.
Just enough, right?
Just enough.
We got about 3 minutes. Let's do this briefly because Steve Springer has just been admitted to the room. First, I want to say on behalf of Craig and everybody, this has been a cool day. We've had a lot of people on today. I appreciate everybody. If you were in the first group, sorry for having to hear this again, but so cool that everybody took time out of their day to come hang out and connect and hopefully get better. At 3 o'clock, Steve Springer will be taking the stage. If you've never heard Steve speak before, Spring, I'm hoping you're in here by now because I'm pumping you right now, buddy, as he would say to me. Spring is, you talk about instant inspiration, instant motivation. You want to run through a wall. I assure you, if you've never heard Steve speak live, you'll hear one of the most passionate people I've ever heard speak on any topic. And I want to thank Craig. Craig to me is, you know, I started in 1990 in the mental game trying to talk to anybody that would listen. Anytime I hear somebody that's out there in the world really trying to push that message forward, it means a ton to me. Craig has just done so much incredible work. If you go to the ABCA show, please make sure you go to the Hot Stove with the Culture and Leadership. Craig hosts that. And CG, personally, I want to thank you, buddy, for taking the time and just making us all better, brother.
Alan, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you everyone for hanging out, and hopefully, I hope you got something. I did, but I'll leave you with this. This is an Augie Garrido quote. I'll leave you with this. He said, "When you make it about learning, you can't lose." So, just keep learning.
Say it one more time so that really sinks in.
When you make it about learning, you cannot lose. And I just want to continue to learn with you guys and get better and have an opportunity to provide the best experience we can for our players. So thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, CG.
Thank you, Alan. You're the man.
I'm trying to think who does this. I've been in a field somewhere.
That's me. That's me. Snaps, baby. Come on. Wait. I got one more for you. Everybody that I can see on the screen, reach as high as you can. Reach as high as you can. All right, relax. All right, let's go. Reach a little higher. Go. Oh, shit. You guys are phonies. Which one are you? You gave your best effort your second time. You had more in the tank your second time around. Crying out loud. Just like your players. All right. Anyways, thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, brother. I can't believe this, man. It's 2 on the button. I'm so proud of like somehow making this transition work.